Let me start with how cool is it with this really amazing group of people here, and it could have been 50 more people, and that's really important because our conversation right now is about how we're disrupting the traditional career paradigm, that non-linear, this really cool path that we're hearing millennials go on is the new normal, and we as talent leaders in the room, who's talent in the room? Who's talent leadership in the room? Yep, there's a whole new way of recruiting and hiring, and I think this is gonna be part of that conversation, so thank you. So some of you may know I wrote a book. It's called, this is a plug. It's called Work Pause Thrive, How to Pause for Parenthood Without Killing Your Career. And I wrote it because I felt the next generation wasn't hearing what I knew to be the truth, which is many women and men that are incredibly successful actually have had these kind of secret nonlinear paths. They've sort of managed to navigate the path to get to the top, and it's not obvious. And oftentimes their path was driven by family obligations, commitments. It could have been children, it could have been parents, it could have been whatever. And I think today is a chance to actually find out about that and find out about what this is about. So, let me introduce you to our incredible panelists. Let's see, I've got you in the wrong order. JJ Payton, she's the Senior Account Director at Sapient Razorfish, and her son is in the room. Nice. Laura Jones just got promoted. We'll hear more about that. She's the Executive Strategy Director at LAB Labs with Y&R. Donalyn Smith is President of North America for Momentum Worldwide. They have underwritten our It Takes a Village tour. So thank you, Donalyn. She and I have been on the show together. It's been so much fun. Armando is here. He's amazing. He comes from Vox Media, and I love that he gets to be part of this conversation because this is not a woman's issue, people, and let's just make that really clear. Thank you, Armando. And way in the back, hi, Shamika Brown-Barbosa has been with 3% from the beginning, right? In some way, shape, and form. I mean, she's just been an amazing friend, partner, advocate, and has an amazing nonlinear career journey and is such an inspiration. So first of all, yay to them. Yay! Sorry, guys, I'm sitting. So we're not going to have them tell their stories because they're too amazing, but we are going to start with you, Laura, because I think you are right now in the thick of this nonlinear journey, and I'd love you sort of just to highlight what you're in the middle of and what's going on for you.
Absolutely. So I'm in what Lisa refers to in her book as the pause, and I work a 3-day work week, and it really came about because I'm a mom. I've got 2 little girls, Lila and Emily, 5 and 3. And we live in New Jersey, and there's a long commute, and I was just missing too much of their lives. But on the other hand, I've put a really hard effort into my career and getting this far. And honestly, maybe I'm a little bit on the cusp of millennial and Gen X, so maybe it's that I want what I want type of thing. But I said, I don't want to have to sacrifice, and I still want to be a part of this agency environment and this culture as a salaried employee. I don't want to have to, why should I have to go out on my own and create my own thing? So I had kind of a moment where I just was at a breaking point. I was going to miss my daughter's preschool, back to school family night. I was crying in an airport in Chicago. And I really got a sense for what I wanted, and it became clear. And it took a long time for me to get up the courage to ask, and had amazing HR partners, and one of them in the room that really worked with me to put together a solution in place where I felt like I could have more time with my family and be involved in their life, but also stay on a career path that I had worked so hard to put time and effort into, and I wasn't willing to give up at that moment. And so your career advice of don't just quit is something that I want to tell everyone that feels like the pressure is too much. You don't have to just quit. Just try to come up with a plan. There's so many people that are willing to work with you.
I love that. I love that. And JJ, you have your own journey, right? Do you want to share what your path has been?
Sure. So I started at Sapient Razorfish, well, it was Sapient at the time, more than 6 years ago, and I didn't know that I was pregnant when I started, but I was, and I thought, oh my gosh, I just started this new job, and then I'm going to have to go in and say, I have to go on a maternity leave. And that made me really nervous. And being new, I didn't know necessarily how they would respond. And so I waited as long as I thought I could get away with it, which is probably longer than I really thought, but anyway, which was about 5 months. And I finally went in and said, guess what? I'm pregnant, I'm gonna be going out on maternity leave. And they said, well, that's great, awesome, congratulations. Take as much time as you want. You wanna take the 12 weeks, fine. You wanna take 6 months, 10 months, you'll always have a job here. So I ended up taking 5 months off. And when I went back, I tried to do the 5-day thing, and I felt like I was missing too much. So I too thought about, well, I don't really want to quit, so how can I do this so that I can still be a part of something that I too have worked a long time and worked really hard to get where I am, and I still liked it, I wanted to do it. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm gonna go in and see if I can go down to 4 days, maybe work 1 day from home, and see if they'd be open to that. So I walked in, and I'm client service or account management, and the office in Detroit at that time was fairly new. It opened in 2010, and there wasn't anyone in the office who had been pregnant, out on maternity leave. Like, I was the first. And so I walked in and said, hey, I'm having a hard time here. I really want to be able to be home to see and be there for those moments where, oh, your son rolled over today. Like, I want to see that. I want someone to tell me that. So fortunately, when I walked in and said I have a solution for this, so that since I'm client facing, hopefully it's still seamless to the client. And when I explained my plan, they were very open to it and agreed to it, no problem. And we took it to my client too at the time. Wow. And he, a white man, by the way, said, oh, I have no concerns. JJ can do more in 20 hours than most people can do in 40. So I fortunately had a lot of support behind me, both on the client side and at Save Me at Razorfish. And my team as well. I managed the Jeep account at that time. And no one ever had an issue with it. So since then, as my son's schedule changed, so when he went into preschool, I wanted to be at the preschool and be in the classroom and help out. And so I went from 35 hours to 30, and so that I could volunteer on Thursday mornings in his class. And so I had Thursday and Fridays where I didn't work until 2 o'clock. And then after 2 o'clock, I worked from home. A year after that, his schedule changed again. Are we seeing a theme here? And so I changed my schedule again, and he was going Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I officially went back full-time at that point, but I arranged for a flexible schedule so that on Mondays and Fridays, I could still pick him up from school at 1 o'clock. And so now he's in kindergarten, and I still enjoy that flexible schedule. And on Mondays and Fridays, I just stay at work a little bit longer, and then I pick him up from the bus at 4.
So we're going to just stop one quick second here, and I just want to say some really interesting numbers, which you probably know. 64 million millennials. That's how many are expected to become parents in the next decade. 61%. That's the number of millennial women who are reporting that they expect to, plan to, feel forced to pause their career or leave their careers because their employers won't work with them. Right? We have 2 examples of employers right here who are saying, wait a minute, we don't want to lose this talent. And I think that's really inspiring, and I think it's the only way we're going to be able to keep women in our industry. As you may know, the reports and the research we did at 3% in 2015 and then again in 2016 revealed that 39% of women in our industry are mothers. The national average is 80% of college-educated women become mothers. Take it again. 39% of women in advertising are mothers, 80% across this country college-educated mothers. There's a huge problem here. So, but we're not just going to focus on mothers. I want to hear Armando, our man.
Not a mother.
Yeah, not a mother, but a proud
Spoiler
dog
alert.
owner, right? You have a journey that's somewhat similar in that you had this non-linear path and you made some choices that really honored your truth.
Yeah, a few career changes. I was talking to Lisa when she first asked me if I would sit on the panel. I was like, I don't want to be disingenuous. Like, I'm not a parent. I don't work part-time. In fact, I work too much. I have a dog. She was like, do you have a husband? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, does he want to see you more? And I was like, yeah. And does that cause a lot of pressure for you? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, then you got something to talk about. Yeah. Which just sort of highlighted the fact that like this is actually a universal issue that many people face in many different ways. But career-wise, I spent pretty much my whole career in creative agencies. The last 10 of those years at BBH. Shout out to my BBH people in the audience. And I had sort of reached a point, I worked in account management, which can be quite grueling and very demanding of your time and puts a lot of strain on your personal life. I also had a mom who was very ill for many years, and I was her caretaker, and that was coinciding with what was probably the biggest moment in my career on the biggest account I'd ever worked on, having more responsibility than I'd ever had as the head of a department, and it all just kind of came to a point. And was successful in the long run, but after my mom passed away, I started talking to the leadership of my agency and expressed the need to maybe like take a step back from the day-to-day client grind. It so happened, and this was serendipitous in many ways, that at the time the agency was looking for a head of talent to lead people and culture, to lead recruitment, to do a better job of marrying the needs of the company with the needs of the people, especially in this ever-changing landscape, which is like acutely changing in the world of advertising agencies. And we interviewed a few candidates. I was very vocally critical of a lot of those candidates, and it didn't happen exactly this way, but my CEO basically said, fine, why don't you do it? And I was like, fine, I will. And so as much as like the move into talent management wasn't necessarily motivated by the need to take a break, it did actually afford me a really great break. And my lifestyle changed significantly, and then sort of took up the mission to help the people that worked for my agency sort of afford them the same kinds of benefits. Ironically, a big part of my job as the head of talent was to help recruit, engage, retain the best talent for the agency. Especially in this time where a lot of people are leaving ad agencies to go pursue careers in startups, technology companies, the media world, go in-house at clients. So I spent a lot of my time trying to understand why that was happening and to stop it from happening. And quite ironically, it ignited my own interest in the world of media and publishing, which is where I now have zagged to working, and I'm at Vox Creative.
I love it. So I think that to me is so powerful because, again, we think of this as a woman's issue, as a parenting issue, and I can't tell you how many men have told me, you know, I actually had to downshift, take a different job, do whatever to incorporate my personal dreams with my family or my needs with my family, and we don't hear that as much. In fact, Ernst & Young did a study last year, and they basically found out that they surveyed 30,000 millennial white-collar professionals. 72% of the millennial men who were fathers had actually passed in a promotion, taken a pay cut, or changed jobs so they can have better work-life balance, but never told their leadership what they were doing. It's a hidden secret. We got to be more out and proud about this. Thank you. Shamika, you're kind of this incredible, well, first of all, you're amazing, and you're also that unicorn. You're incredibly talented, creative. You were the group creative director at Walter Isaacson. Mm-hmm. You've had this incredibly storied career, and then you also became a mom, and tell us your journey.
So, yes, I am that elusive unicorn where I'm a creative director and writer, African-American, female. We do exist. We do exist.
Yes. Woo!
So my path, I've been in advertising for 18 years, and my kids are 11 and 9. I have 2 girls. And it was just a juggle, you know, up and down, stress, everything. And in my last position, I was GCD. I was running the New York office for a short period of time overall while my partner was out on maternity leave. I was also in like the 1.5 year point of a separation with my husband, and it was like, okay, something has got to give. And I was just working so much. Like my last timesheet had 72 hours for 1 week and 74 hours for the other. So I was able to leave work at 6 and, you know, get my kids and get them in bed and do all that, and then pick up my laptop from 9 to 1 a.m. And so that's how the hours, were just accumulating. And I reached a breaking point where I'm like, I can't continue to do this. But I had let my site expire, and I'm like, I just don't have the time to look for a job, and I'm Black, so we don't quit a job if you don't have a job. So I'm like, I'm stuck. I'm like, so what am I gonna do? And I just decided to do head down. I'm just gonna, barrel through it. And I ended up getting laid off as a part of a reorg, and that just changed everything. Like, that was just the emotional, figurative, literal release. And even though I was now the head of my own household, I was in a position where for some reason, I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna dive back in. Because it really had never really worked for my kids, for me. I wanted to be more present, and I knew diving back into a job at that level was not gonna be that. So I decided to freelance, and I'm in New York, been in New York the whole time, just kind of dig into my network and see what I can do, and it started working. Another pivotal point for me was the 3% conference that fall was actually in San Francisco, and at the end of Cindy Gallup's keynote, she opened the mic and invited people up to say why 2015 would not be like any other year that they've had. And I summoned the courage to get up and declare that it would not be the same for me, because I would not work for a job that didn't work for me. And so I had to double down at that point. You put something out there to Cindy Gallup, you kind of got to follow through. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And so over the next 2 months, I really put my head down trying to do it. And then the stress started coming because I couldn't get the jobs together, and I couldn't, get things to string along. And I decided to start looking for work, even though I didn't want the work, and nothing was coming. And so at that point, it got a little wonky in that there were some rumors about why I couldn't find work and, things like that. And I had to expand my circle of people. And one of my friends, who I met through the 3% conference, and told me that I should have a meeting with Rob Schwartz. So I went and met with him, and he had just become CEO of TBWA Chiat New York. And I met with him, and he gave me creative direction on my website, which as a creative director, you don't really think about, like, wait a minute, I need a critical lens in terms of what I'm putting out there. And after I'd gotten laid off, I just threw everything that I'd ever done in life out there on the website, and it looked crazy. Like, once I stepped back, I'm like, whoa, that looks insane. And he gave me direction on how to redo my site, use my storytelling skills to tell stories about the work that I'd done, cherry pick. He's like, you don't have to show everything. If they want to see it, send it to them after. So I did that, and the calls started coming, and that was about July 2016. And when the calls started coming, it was the same job that I didn't want before. And I'm like, you know what? I had done this for a year. And I didn't need the 6-figure salary to support my family. I could pick my kids up, twice a week at 3 o'clock. And I decided to double down again and say, if it didn't work for me, I won't take it. And so those offers that came, I would try to get the 4-day work week. I'd try to, figure it out. And HR was down, the CCO was not down. So it's kind of like, okay, I politely decline. And much to their amazement, but I didn't need the job anymore. It was kind of, do I want the job? And so for me, it shifted into a place of power, and I've been able to dive into some passions and start to monetize them. So I launched a travel agency this year, and I'm looking at launching an executive coaching practice next year. And it's just kind of things that I want to do where I can help those unicorns. There's a nonprofit that's off in the works, and partnering with talent and recruitment agency, a branding agency that is centered around retention and coming at that from a strategic place. So it's just kind of, me figuring out that I didn't need what I thought I needed, and what I have is pretty awesome. So,
Wow. That thought of coming from an empowered place is so impressive to me, right? I mean, I thank you for sharing your story. So I interviewed 186 incredibly successful women and surveyed 1,500 more for the book. And here's what I learned. One, 72% of the women actually downshifted, paused their careers. Only 11% wanted to. The rest were forced to because the workplace wouldn't support them, because they couldn't actually come up with a solution that would work. They had to do it. Interestingly, and it'll be kind of 5 years from now fun to see your journey, because what we saw was that 89% of them relaunched their careers. So their pause actually didn't terrify or ruin their career. But the other thing that was really interesting, of the 28% who never paused their career, the number one reason, and even though you say you're on the pause and you are sort of in theory, they didn't stop their careers because they didn't have to, because they had workplaces that supported them. They were all in. The companies, the way they worked in, were all in. And it wasn't about necessarily face time. It was about productivity and adulting. And I trust you to get your work done. And I trust you to work with the team and making that happen. So Donalyn, when I was first meeting with Momentum and they were saying, hey, we really want to talk about this message about how everyone is a stakeholder in this conversation, that everyone has a role to play. Donalyn hadn't really shared her story, or at least I didn't even know her story, that in fact she's a walking Work, Pause, Thrive role model. She actually, I'll speak it and then I want to hear how you did it. She actually worked at Momentum, did what these two women are doing, downshifted for a period of time. Then when she was ready and they needed her, she went back in full time, and she's now running the friggin' agency, people, right? Hello. Now, what I love about that is that Donalyn, they didn't make the mistake of losing the talent. They figured out how to make it work, and then ultimately, what are the rewards? But Donalyn, you had a very strategic, very tactical way you went about this. Do you want to share your business brief? I think it's so cool.
So it probably sounds a little bit more strategic and planned than it actually was, but it came on the heels of kind of an oh shit moment after I had my third, found myself in a meeting 7 days later, not by design, but and I was driving home sobbing, like, oh my God, what did I just do? Like, I left my 7-day-old at home for this meeting. The meeting ended up being like super great. We won the business in the room, and I was devastated. I was like, oh my God. So I spent the rest of my leave writing a business plan, an employee brand plan, like a marketing plan, like you would do as a business leader. And it was 3 pages long with charts and graphs and contingency plans on what would happen if they said no, what we would do, because at the time I was making probably half what my husband was. And I came in at the end of my maternity leave, I was all prepared, and I got through the situational assessment and kind of my objectives, and my boss was like, yeah, okay, done. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I get it. And so I was very grateful for that, and did what I needed to do, was able to spend time with my children, came back a little bit earlier than I had planned. There was a part of my plan that was really I could have gone into a wind down mode. I was considering maybe just retiring at that point, and then circumstances at the agency changed, and opportunities came, and I went ahead and took them, and here I am today. But that experience, as grateful as I am for it, is what helps me in running the agency now in North America, to make sure that we're doing the same thing for the people that are coming up behind us that are trying to have families. It's very, very important, and we spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of time because I know how important it was for me to be able to have that path.
I love it. Thank you. So I want to ask both of sort of the big leaders here, Armando and Donalyn. So you're running creative, and we hear, oh, it can never happen in creative. Oh no, yeah, maybe account can do it and strategy can do it, but creative, oh no, we can't do it that way. What's your take on that, Mr. I ran talent and now I'm running, creative for Vox Media?
I think it's probably cliche to say that it needs to start with the culture, but it needs to start with the culture. And I don't even mean the culture of people management. I mean the very fabric of the company needs to be built around this kind of a mindset. I've seen at Vox Media, unlike any company that I've ever worked for, a sort of aptitude for change and a culture that truly thrives on change. And I think the way that filters down into, my very first interview. First of all, when I interviewed with Lindsay Nelson, who is the CMO, who is my boss, every single time I met her, she'd say to me, what are your reservations? And I'd say, I just want to remind you, I've never done this before. Like, are you totally, do you are in fact know that I have never worked in media or for a publishing company, whatever. And finally she was like, shut up. Like, why do you keep, you're like talking yourself out of a job. And I'm like, well, I just want you to know what you're signing up for, because from the world that I came in, BBH was a place that was like incredibly promoting of diversity and of very flexible sort of working arrangements. But still, the agency world is quite structured in a way around very particular roles, and those roles are filled. And the economy of people management is sort of a very particular kind of economy. So to go to a company that was saying like, we're hiring you because you're different, and then to get there and to see the way that the culture at the highest levels embraces change. My interview with my CEO, the only, like, it was a very casual conversation. The only hard question he asked me was like, how do you thrive in change? What are your feelings about change? Can you embrace change? All a long way of saying, I think the way that this filters down to the way that we help people manage their careers is that you make it okay for people to change, and you make it okay for people to move laterally from one job to the other, and you make it okay, and it's not scary when somebody all of a sudden says, I need a break, or I need to downsize, or I need to take a little time off. And so I just sort of see it as my job to take what the company has already built, which is this culture that thrives on change, technological change, people change, what have you, and just make sure that we're sort of adhering to that on a day-to-day basis. Some of the tangible ways that that sort of plays out, I mean, simple exercises. We just did an exercise within Box Creative where we worked with every single person in the group, which is about 40 people, and we helped them develop a career plan. And we were very careful not to sort of follow the very typical linear track, but to rather almost lay out in like decision tree format. Like, if you like this, then these are different kinds of roles that could ultimately lead to. If you like this, then you might ultimately end up experimenting with this different kind of role. So if you wanted to follow a more technical path, you could go into engineering. If you want, because it's also a very young company, and people are still very much in their formative years, and they need some help just understanding like, what is the job that I do today even lead to? And importantly, some of the jobs that we put on those decision trees were jobs outside of our company, jobs that we could never even provide you, but at least opened up the possibility that like, I don't necessarily have to be taking this very vertical track upwards. So just, I think little things like that, celebrating side gigs. We do like sort of every other week, a happy hour where one person stands up at that happy hour and they talk about a side gig that they might have. So your day job might be that you're a producer, but you play in a band, and we celebrate that. And then the last thing I'll sort of mention, again, these are just like really simple things, but what they do is they incept the culture in a way that like it breeds total acceptance and open-mindedness about like where and how people evolve throughout their careers. We just rewrote all the job responsibilities in my group, and we rewrote them in terms of majors and minors. Because one of the nice things about being in a very sort of change-oriented, fast-moving technology media company is that like you've got a lot of different people who do a lot of different things, and they're very multifaceted, and we're very careful that we not put people in too tight a box. And so we structured all the responsibilities in majors and minors. So your major is the thing you were hired to do, but you might also know After Effects, and from time to time you want to play around with animation, so we're going to make sure that you're given an opportunity to kind of exercise that skill, even though this is the thing that you're going to be held accountable for ultimately.
So thank you. So Donalyn, how do you guys are navigating this? This is the same issue that he's facing, only you've got a whole country to deal with.
You know, I think it's a whole bunch of things that have to happen kind of simultaneously. I think culture is a huge part of it. I think leadership is really a huge part of it. I think that if you don't have people at the top of your organization that really believe in the balance between work and life fit, it's a problem. And nothing makes me happier than sitting down with somebody outside of the organization that's coming to interview with Momentum. I love when one of their first questions is, what is your philosophy on work and life fit? I love that. 10 years ago, we probably would have said, I'm not gonna talk to her anymore. Yeah. And now it's like, it's my favorite question. It tells me a lot about, A, they're doing their homework, they wanna come to a place where they can thrive, And I think if you're in an organization, you know now whether your leaders and the culture are fit. And if it isn't, I tell people to leave. But I think it's almost 100% of it. And then, you know, I'm a huge supporter of the client conversation too. Very proud of the fact that we're partnering with, probably half of our clients on diversity, making sure that we are bringing in diverse and inclusive workforces to work on their business. Enormous efforts to make sure that that's happening. It doesn't stop there, right? So I'm having conversations with clients like, we can bring in all the great talent in the world, but if you can't partner with us to make sure that they stay, it's just going to be a revolving door of the exact talent that we all agree is what's making our agencies better. So it's not just an agency problem.
This point about
it's a partnership problem.
Asking the question up front is like so important, in that it's sort of like a two-way, like you're mutually accountable, you for your career and your boss for helping to like fulfill, like, and to treat you as an individual, because different people have different needs. Some people actually thrive working a lot. Some people have different family situations, what have you. We just hired a creative director, a man, who said to me in the interview process, very honestly, I have an overwork issue. Like, I tend to overwork, I tend to burn out very quickly. That is my issue, I need you to be aware of that. I feel like I lie awake at night thinking about this guy. Like, now I feel naturally more accountable for his work-life fit because we had an honest conversation about it, and I check in on him more frequently, and that's what works for him. But I wouldn't even know to sort of give it the extra special attention if he hadn't been so forthright with his own.
Shamika, so you're hearing this like, you know, nirvana. We all want to work there, right? So let me hear your thoughts in terms of, you were doing those 74-hour work weeks. What do you think you could have done? What do you think the agency could have done? Could your boss have done? Like, what was the confluence of the eye of the hurricane kind of thing?
Well, it was a few things, but in general, we were really short-staffed at the time, and the team I had was very green. So we were doing a lot of things where they still needed me to creative direct, but then there were things that I needed to write as well. So I was like that working creative director. I needed to be in the meeting, I needed to run the meeting, I needed to do the post meeting, like it was a whole thing. And with all that was going on in my personal life, it was just a lot, like reached a point where it's like, okay, there aren't enough hours in the day for me to do everything how I would like to do it, and I'm a bit of an overachiever myself, so it's kind of like, I knew that there was just a point where I physically wasn't going to be able to do it. So it would have helped to have some more support at the mid-level, where I could have teams that I could give the work to, that they can do it and check in without me needing to guide the work as much as I was doing. It was incredibly flexible, but again, it was just an overwhelming amount that needed to be done across the week. And so, there was just no give there.
So, as a woman of color, do you think it's, lovely Laura, JJ, they can raise their hands and say, I need help. One, they're not in creative, right? Two, they're not women of color. Do you think there's like an extra burden that you might face if you had said, hey, Donalyn, I really need some more time? Is that an issue, or do you think it's not an issue and you have to acknowledge that? Or I'm asking that question, I hope I'm not doing, I'm asking the question.
It's a personal issue for me, because I don't like to ask for help. I like to be that strong, independent, well, I can do it, I can handle it. And so I'm not predisposed to asking for help. And so that's something that across this last 3 years, I've needed to accept. And I needed to find those allies and those people who would support me and my decisions, along the way. I had asked for other things, but I didn't ask for help necessarily. I was asking for a senior team. I was asking for very functional things that would make my workday easier, but I wasn't looking at it from a point of what do I need, and it wasn't until I was out of that space where I could focus on what it is that I wanted specifically that I began to consider it that way. But I'm currently freelancing at Saatchi. Shout out to my Saatchi peeps. And I was able to come in because we had a very frank conversation about all of the things that I have going on right now, and would that be okay? Can we work around this? Can I have time out of the office every month? Is that okay? And it's working right now, you know? So it's that added flexibility, it's the value placed upon what you're bringing to the table that makes the biggest difference. And, you know, in instances where people really want to figure out a way to work with you, they will.
I know.
You know, they really will.
I love it. Thank you. So, Laura, you tell us about how you asked for what you needed and got promoted. So let's cover that journey, because getting promoted when you're doing this sort of sends a message that they're really investing in you.
Yes, so it was interesting. So I've been doing this 3-day-a-week for 2 years. And when I first went into it, actually was probably about the time that I should have been promoted. And I felt like my card to play, my chip on the table, rather than asking for the promotion, because the last thing I wanted at that point was more work, was to trade that in and to take the 3 days. So as I looked around and saw, you know, my colleagues kind of rising, and even people that had worked for me having higher titles at different companies, I knew that I was still doing that level of work. And my unique situation, and I think it's an interesting one you bring up with the client relationship, is I actually shifted from being more client-facing in a strategy role to our internal brand analytics team, which had about 50% internal clients and then 50%. So just the balance of times that I absolutely had to be at a client meeting at a certain time of date changed. And so I felt like the level of work I was doing, I was taking on more managerial responsibility, I was growing, but I had somehow fallen behind because I traded in my power and also traded in some of my salary to get this arrangement. And I was starting to feel like the balance had shifted to saying, I need to be recognized for the work that I'm doing. And so as our group actually merged with a different group in the organization and reorganized, and it presented an opportunity for me to step up and take a leadership role. And managing and mentoring is something that's always been really important to me, and I'm still managing to do that. And one of the best compliments I get from my team is when people say, it doesn't feel like you're here 3 days. And on one hand, I'm like, wow, that's great. And the other hand, I'm like, oh, then I guess they should pay me for 5 days, which is a common theme that I've heard with a lot of people. But I'd rather be in the position. So I said I'd like to be an active part of the leadership team and be responsible for growing our business and being responsible for things like pricing strategy and moving forward. And you know, I'd like the title that goes along with that. And my manager recognized that I was an integral part of the team and the success we'd had in the past 2 years, and was given that. So it was really exciting, but also you can't ask for what you don't get. And I was here last year at the conference sitting, and I was just hearing all of these stories about women who had done this and who were up here on the stage, and had a C title, and it was like this best kept secret that I didn't even know that it was something I could ask for. And once I realized that this was even on the table, then it was a no-brainer. But actually to get to that point, to realize that yes, I could ask, and having permission to ask was half the battle.
So, but JJ, you were a total trailblazer in your agency. Did you say you were the first to be, you know,
First
pregnant?
client-facing, yes,
yeah.
and first person in our office, yes, to
Okay,
be
so,
pregnant.
you know,
and I feel like I've kind of paved the way for people. And not only in my office, but at that time, it was Sapient at that time, I was the only or the first client-facing person in all of Sapient to have a reduced and flexible schedule. And I too was promoted having a reduced schedule. And I also now, I continue to grow the business that I managed, and I now oversee all of the brands for Fiat Chrysler. So.
And still working, no, you're back full-time now.
I am now back full-time,
exactly.
yes, but I still have a flexible schedule.
Yeah, wow. There's the answer, people. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. We have just a few more moments. But I want to, if there's one thing that you think, like what is the one thing that has to happen to make this change so that we can have this sort of solution set? So Shamika, start with you. One thing.
I think people that are in position of power just need to begin to listen. Listen to who they have inside their walls. And we often try to come with a solution, but really look at what that underlying issue might be, because maybe the solve that is put forward won't work within the company culture, but there may be another way that you can address the underlying issue in a way that would benefit and fit within the company culture.
Nice. Armando?
This might be like a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's worth just noting that like in many ways these people issues are tied to the economy of many agencies, and where the unit of currency in the transaction between agency and client is time. And so time is valued so much more than value. And I think as long as that continues to happen, it is all too tempting for agency leaders. This is not necessarily the case where I am now because it's a different kind of business model. But in a typical agency business model, you're sort of always biased toward the person who can spend the most amount of time and can work the fastest. And there's so much emphasis on that because that's ultimately what drives the margin versus who is going to add the most value. And I realize that is a very big issue that requires a lot of change and is probably being discussed in another room at this same conference, because it usually is. But I think we can't neglect to sort of like recognize the relationship between those two things and also allow money in the budget to invest in people that might require a little bit of a risk, either because they require a different kind of working arrangement or because they come from a background that does not necessarily perfectly fit the job spec, or because they come from a world that doesn't look like us. There needs to be financial support for that kind of a thing, because all too often, if you leave it up to the hiring manager, they're gonna go for the easiest option, for the fastest option.
Nice.
I think
Right?
I think celebrating more of the success. Laura, you pointed out until 2 years ago you didn't know it was happening. I think all too often, and I've been guilty of this too, not in the past couple of years, but somebody comes in, you try and work with them on a 4-day work week, and then it's like, well, let's not talk about it. So we don't announce it to the teams, we sure as heck don't tell our clients, and I think we should be doing the exact opposite. Hey, I just hired Sarah and she's on a 4-day work week and she doesn't work on Fridays, and celebrating that internally, externally, up on stage as much as we possibly can, because the more people know about it and the more people feel that they have the permission to ask for it, they will. And I think that will help our industry as opposed to this kind of quiet, hidden secret that we have.
Yeah, you had emailed, was it one of you? I think Laura, you had emailed me saying, let's make sure to talk about that.
Yes,
Want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I still struggle with, actually, in terms of responding to emails or saying no to meetings on days where I'm not supposed to be in the office. And caregiving is a big challenge. I think even with a part-time schedule is finding reliable, affordable childcare when you don't have the luxury of family to just fall back on. It dictates most of my decisions. Would I love to come to a meeting on Friday with the CEO of this awesome company? Absolutely, but I've asked my mother-in-law to babysit because I have a nanny share on that Friday like 3 other times. I really can't make this an entire family problem.
And you're not paying me for
And
that
you're not
day, by the
paying
way.
me for it, right? And so it limits my, it's a balance between my ambition and the things I want to do, and then also the responsibilities that I have at home given the schedule that I've fit. But talking about it and making it acceptable that other people, there's someone on our team that has always had aspirations to be a filmmaker, and they manage an important piece of client business, so we're just going to let them do that and manage that part of business, and then have a flexible schedule and reduced time to work on that. So I think recognizing people on your team as whole and as what they have going on in their entire lives is very important. And the other piece I will say is, thanks to your book and a lot of the momentum about non-traditional and non-linear work life balance and work arrangements, I think there's going to be a lot more people in the workplace that want this in the next role and in the next role. And the one thing that I love to ask recruiters just to kind of see is, have you hired anyone off the bat? This tends to be something that I was at my company for 5 years before I was able to go into this role because this type of arrangement, because I had established myself and I was a known quantity, et cetera, et cetera. But there isn't much appetite for taking people on in a salaried employee, non-freelance way at a reduced schedule. And that is ultimately going to limit, I think, everyone's ability to keep careers moving and growing and get the best talent and the best people, because those people are just walking out of the industry altogether. They're going freelance and starting their own thing, and they're actually not wanting to work for us because of the things that we can offer.
Right, Shamika?
Yes.
Right, exactly. And wouldn't that have been amazing if she could have come in on their terms? So I think also giving people, if that's something that's on the table, put it on the table for them at the beginning, so we don't put too much of the burden on people that are already worried about, to Armando's point, are you sure you want me for this role? Like, I don't know if I'm the right role. And then saying, but are you sure? Because I can only do this, I have to leave at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's a lot of pressure for someone kind of going in. So just making it all the options available, I think, is going to keep the talent in the industry where we need it the most.
Exactly. JJ, any last thoughts?
Yes, my one thing is just ask, which I think we've all heard seems to be the key message of this conference, and it's always been my thing too. Because it doesn't really matter if there are established programs available for your particular situation or not. You should ask for what you need, because you never know, you might get it. And the worst they can say is no. And
that's information.
Right, and really, are you out much? Probably not, Yeah. So, yeah, whatever your situation happens to be, mine was my son Case. Yours might be school or filmmaking or a medical issue or caring for an elderly parent. Whatever it happens to be confident in yourself and ask for what you need.
Love that. Yes. I'd love to open it up to all of you amazing people in the room. Jerry, okay, go for it. Can we, oh, sorry. No, Lynn, can you, sorry, I screwed that up. Can you do that first?
Thank you so much. My name is Tina Hadley, and I founded a company called The Second Shift that provides opportunities for women, professional women, to keep working during their pause with companies that understand the value of their expertise. And I just wanted to testify. I don't even know if Momentum and Vox knows that you are clients of ours. But you have taken the chance on understanding that you have opportunities internally to support your full-time employees by bringing in experts when there is more help needed. And I just wanted to say that you guys are definitely practicing what you preach, and I was not paid to be here. But this is for me an opportunity to say thank you, and you are definitely disrupting this like binary on-off switch that we think about the way a career goes. It's nice to see you.
Hi, my name is Carol, and I work for Samsung. This is directed for Shamika and anyone else who can ask 2 quick questions. So the first one is, for someone who has many interests and talents, how do you put it all together into making it actionable and executing it for your own career? And my next question is for each of you, if you can answer it, what is one piece of advice that you would give for people in the pause phase of their career when they're ready to relaunch? What has made it successful for you?
So for me, it's been a priority shift. So, what I want to focus on, I'll go wholeheartedly. I research, I figured out my travel thing. I decided last year, I'm going to start that this year. I'm going to do it in 2016. It ends in March 2017, and then I'll incorporate and do all of those things in 2017. And for like my coaching, there's a program that starts in April that I want to do. So 2018 will probably be dedicated to that. So I just need to stay really focused and sharp in all those things that I want to do, because I have to pay my bills and I have to do the work and I have to do all these other things, you know, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday. For me, in terms of the pause, it's just staying connected and keeping your networking circle active. So I participate with 3%, I participate with AdColor, I'm an alumna of MAPE, and you know, so I'm always kind of in and around and make sure that I'm aware of where people are moving, and I'm always on LinkedIn, and just, you know, making sure that I know what's going on in the industry, even if I'm not in it in a day-to-day role.
With regard to one thing people who are in the pause can do, there's a lot of programs in many different industries, not just advertising industry, for people that are ready to go back full time, to get them back up to speed to little things that they may have missed. And we're actually, shameless plug, also launching one for Wire Group called Power On. And we really believe that careers pause, but talent doesn't. And so it's really important to, if you are in a pause, not second guess yourself and your skills. You've just chosen to focus on other things, but there's life experience there, and it's really valuable. And so to look for these resources when you're coming back to the workforce, because there's so many out there that can help, and people that want to get you back into the pool of talent that we have available.
Can I take a moment so how many agencies here have a Power On example, a return to work internship of some kind, shape, or form? All right, secret. Yay! Secret to success, people. Let me tell you what I'm seeing. I started writing and researching the book in 2015. A year and a half later, 2017, and almost over, I am seeing a huge explosion of companies across every industry start creating these return to work internships, not just for moms. These are for people who've traveled around the world and maybe kind of whatever. It's really an opportunity to bring in talent, to test them out, to see what's going to work. And what I hear back and again from the people who are running these, oh my God, it's like this vetted talents, and they're up to speed so quickly, and they're able to relaunch. So if you don't have one, really seriously think about launching one. We're happy to give you some thoughts and advice on how to do that. I jumped ahead. Do you guys want to say anything?
I just say don't stop learning, because like it's so cliche to say, but like everything is constantly changing. So like chances are most of the stuff that you were doing when you left, when you took your pause, has probably evolved so much. So just like stay abreast. That doesn't necessarily mean formal education, but just sort of follow what's happening in the industry so that you can sort of hit the ground running upon reentry, and not just at the moment of reentry, but just sort of stay sharp.
Yeah. If I may, can I take a different take on the pause thing? Because I know I had a reduced schedule and went down to 30 hours, but I never thought of it as pausing. It never even entered my mind, because I continued to manage a huge piece of business. I continued to grow it and continue moving it forward. I moved myself forward. So I feel like if you have the drive and the determination, it's not a pause.
Absolutely.
You're integrating two things or more things, whatever those things are, and you're figuring out a way to move all of those things forward.
So yay, shout out to you, JJ, because really what I use that word because I kept hearing it back from the people I interviewed, but the truth of the matter is that reframe's right on, because really what they were doing was trailblazing the path they had to create because the workplace didn't support them, because we're structured around the ideal worker model, expecting that person to be available 24/7, and they're supposed to have someone at home taking care of all the home needs. Well, that's how we're still structured. Started in 1950, it's still going today, but that's not the reality of the American workforce and everything. So you're just talking about how you integrate and how you trailblaze to innovate your own path. So nonlinear is the new normal. I think we've got about 15 seconds left, so we're going to miss, last question.
I'll make it really quick. Hi, Marla Kaplowitz with Portales. You said that 39% of women in advertising are moms versus 80% in the US. Can you share what industries are doing it well and just a few key things they're doing, tools that are really having a difference in those industries?
It's a great question. So Silicon Valley, where I'm from, ironically has a comparably young sales force. How many of you recruiters are losing great talent to Silicon Valley? or tech firms, right? Is that a trend? I hear about it all the time. We don't have proof points yet about how they're retaining women, but the truth of the matter is, if you actually looked at the best educated women in this country, we're seeing a huge drop-off. 57% of women who went to the top 20% of colleges in this country paused their career. Let me say that again. 57% of the best educated women in this country are forced or choose to, you can make it a choice, it's in quotes, to pause their career. So the answer back to you is that no one's really doing it well. We're losing the talent. That's why we have that's one of the many reasons we have so few women in leadership. They're gone. So we got a problem here. So I don't have an answer for you on that because there aren't very many industries doing well. I actually think advertising, because we don't have the same pipeline issue that tech has, but we have the same youthful talent. We have an opportunity to disrupt the entire model for every other industry and show how it can be done, and I challenge us to do that. So rock on, ad industry, we can do that. I want just a shout out to our amazing trailblazing panelists and what they're doing. You guys are rocking it. Thank you so much. Oh yeah.
And where's my mic? Vox Media, we're hiring. We're hiring.
Wait, what?
Hit me up, creatives.
Yeah. Oh, you're hiring? Oh, yeah. You
producers.
shameless plug. break, guys. All right, thank you.